The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina MacKenzie.
So capturing all the pain and glory of an incredible family saga, Surf's Up is the definitive tribute to a remarkable band and the genius who made it all possible. We are talking, of course, about the Beach Boys. Welcome to the show, author of the book, Peter Doggett.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Great to have you on, Peter. He really was a genius, wasn't he? He definitely deserved that tag.
Yes, I mean, the amazing thing about Brian Wilson was that he didn't go to music college. He didn't, go to anything like the Brit School or something where he was trained to be a musician and a producer and an arranger and a songwriter. It was just natural talent, and he found his own way. He did have musical parents, but not sort of high caliber, classically trained musical parents. So at least music was around when he was young, but everything else he picked up for himself.
And of course, no platform, no X Factor or Pop Idol or anything back then. I mean, how did he manage to start the Beach Boys and become so well known?
Well, he had the advantage in a way of being in America because unlike if he'd been doing the same thing at the time the Beatles were starting out, for example, which was a year or so later, the Beach Boys signed their first deal at the end of 1961. The Beatles was a year after that. And now in England, there were very, very few record labels. In America, every state, every town had its small record labels. So it was pretty easy for the absolutely classic showbiz father, Murray Wilson, who was the father of the three Wilson brothers in the Beach Boys, to find a friend who he knew he'd written some songs for and drag the boys along. And, these are my boys and you're going to give them a deal. And they sang beautifully. They had a gimmick, which was writing about surf music. Writing about surfing, which was really popular sport with kids in Southern California. And so they got signed up as a novelty. And I shouldn't think they themselves imagined that it would ever last for more than a few months.
Wow, yeah, of course, we've got Surfing USA, we've got California Dreaming, and the one we've just played, Surf's Up. And it is their harmonies, isn't it? It's the way they harmonise together that I find so beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, which once again is something Brian learned by listening to music. And the other thing they haven't mentioned is that he was more or less deaf in one ear at a young age.
Wow.
So he could never really hear stereo. But he had the ability to hear a song, learn it almost instantly, and then at the family piano, he would gather around his two brothers and his first cousin, Mike Love, who's still out on the road with the Beach Boys today, aged 83 or 84. He would gather them round and say, okay, you're going to sing this harmony part. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. Okay, try it and see what happens. And they'd all go, oh my goodness, that sounds incredible. How did you do that?
Yeah.
That was the basis of their career. And now you can only do that if you've got a sort of intuitive genius.
Was he the leader then? I know he was a member of the group, producer, composer, but was he really the leader out of all of them?
Certainly when it came to the sort of creative process, yeah. I mean, within a couple of years, he suffered a nervous breakdown and quit going on tour with the rest of the group. So he wasn't the leader on stage. And the front man on stage, as I mentioned, is Mike Love. So he was the sort of the outgoing personality in the band, the one who could sell Brian's songs to audiences all over the world. But I've heard so many tapes of their recording sessions, and Brian is the one who is the parent in the studio going, okay, come on, you guys, shut up, you guys. We're going to do this. Let's go. And, as if he had all these unruly kids around him, which he did, more or less.
Well, he did suffer his demons, as you say. He had a mental breakdown. Did he suffer from mental health problems, or was there something that triggered that?
Oh, goodness. The thing I find interesting is if you go back and look at really, really early films of the Beach Boys from when they first started out, Brian is at the front and he's singing his falsetto harmonies and so on, and he's playing bass and he looks quite confident, but there's an air of vulnerability about him. He looks sensitive, he looks pained. And I don't think anybody would have noticed that at the time, but looking back, you can see that he was that sort of sensitive guy. And yeah, all the way through his life from 64 onwards, he was fighting demons. And increasingly it became a sort of variety of paranoid schizophrenia where he would hear voices in his head the whole time saying, "You're about to die. We're coming for you, Wilson. We're going to kill you." So that's from the mid-60s right up until he died earlier this year. So it's an awful, awful thing to have to carry around with you. And I'm sure it was exacerbated by lots of drug experimentation in the 1960s, as rock stars did. And then after that, not all of the psychiatric and medical help he received down the years was helpful. And I mean, this is so often the case. People get drugs from the doctors to help with things, and they cause more problems than they actually solve. And so an awful lot of Brian's issues down the years, I think, were related to the cocktail of medication that he was on.
But all that as well, I know when you go into the family saga, do you think he did have a difficult upbringing?
He had an extremely difficult upbringing. I don't know, it seems to be, without mentioning any names, it seems to be a thing about parents from the sort of 1940s, 1950s, that if they had a tough childhood, their idea of parenting was to repeat the same thing on their children. Particularly applies to fathers, it seems. Yeah. Whereas I like to think that in more recent decades, the parents go, I was miserable. I'm not going to do that to my children. So his father, Murray, very ambitious, frustrated songwriter himself, he had been terribly bullied by his father. And so he then revisited the same treatment on his three kids. He used to beat them really severely, particularly Brian, because he was the oldest and he was the one who had all the musical promise. And then the next brother down was Dennis Wilson, who was the wild man of the group. He was the surfer, he was the sportsman, fast cars, fast living, fast girls. And he would, all he had to do was enter a room and he would fall out with his father. And then the youngest brother, Carl, had the unenviable task of being the peacemaker in the family. And then he became the peacemaker in the Beach Boys as well. So all these sort of family roles playing out over decades and decades.
Yeah, yeah. And as far as family is concerned, did he marry and have children?
Brian married twice, yeah. He married a young singer called Marilyn, who from a group called the Honeys, whom he produced. I think she was 16 when they got married, and he was probably 16 in his head, although I think officially he was 22. And they had two daughters at the end of the 60s who became the two Wilsons out of the group Wilson-Phillips.
Of course. That's just dawned on me. Of course it has. Yeah, they're very good.
And then with his second marriage in, I'm trying to remember, the 90s, he and his second wife, Melinda, they adopted about 6 children.
Wow.
And yes, I mean, given his mental health issues, I'm not sure in Britain he would have been allowed to adopt as many children, but they or at least some of them have spoken since he died and said what a loving and caring father he was. So good for him.
Yeah, indeed. Am I right? I feel like I've read somewhere that the Beach Boys had a connection with bizarre figures such as Charles Manson.
So yes, they did. They had that unfortunate accolade. In particular, Dennis Wilson. I've said he was the wild one. He would drive his sports cars all around the canyons of LA, and he would pick young women up and give them lifts. And anybody who was hitchhiking, and usually their lift would go via his bedroom on the way home. And he did that one night, and he was a very, very good-looking guy. And the two women, when they were leaving, they said, "Oh, you must meet our guru, Charlie." And so he did. He went out and met Charles Manson, and as so many people in the rock business in the late 60s did, they thought, well, this is an interesting guy, Manson. He's very charismatic. He's got these piercing eyes, and he's writing not very commercial, but interesting songs at a time when not very commercial, but interesting songs was a big part of the rock business. So he seemed to sort of fit in with all the other unusual singer-songwriters at the time. And so Dennis Wilson was very keen to get Charlie Manson a record contract. But also, and this is something I've focused on in the book, and there's a chapter about it, although Dennis, after the Charles Manson murders in 1969, when the actress Sharon Tate and several of her friends, and then another couple also were murdered by members of the Manson family. After that, Dennis Wilson came out and said, I didn't really know him. I didn't know. It's starting to sound a bit like Donald Trump. No,
yes, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And yeah, I did give him an audition, but, that was a year ago. But I came across fairly obscure interviews that Dennis did right before the murders, and he's still talking about Manson, and he's talking about life in the Manson commune. And he was there. He wasn't there for 5 minutes. He was living with one of the articles is actually called Dennis Wilson, I live with 17 girls. That was the hook for the article in the old British pop paper, the Record Mirror.
Crikey. Oh.
So he completely fell for the Manson rhetoric. Fortunately, he wasn't around when the murders were happening, but at the same time, Manson was occasionally getting questioned by the police, or he would meet people and he would introduce himself to people as the drummer of the Beach Boys. So it was almost like there was a personality swap going on between the two of them. Yeah. So it's a very strange story. And also the weirdest thing for me is, in the 60s particularly, they were a very, very straight-laced group, the Beach Boys. They were always clean-cut. They either wore stripy shirts that rapidly went out of fashion, or they were wearing white suits. So they weren't like sort of hippie, maverick outlaws. And suddenly you've got a member of this really straight-laced group who gets involved with one of the most notorious serial killers of the 60s. If you were putting that in a movie, nobody would believe it.
You couldn't make it up, could you? Well, sadly, he did die this year, June of this year. Was it drug-related? Was it age-related? What did he die?
Brian's death was age-related. He'd been declining for a long time. To everybody's amazement, really, he went out on the road from the late 90s onwards, right the way through till a couple of years ago. And often he would look very involved, but increasingly as the years went by, he would begin to look as if he didn't really know where he was or what he was doing. And he had an amazing band with him, Brian Wilson, and old friends from the music business as well, from the Beach Boys story, would come along and play. And so they would be doing these incredible gigs. And in the middle of it, certainly the last couple of tours, would be Brian sat behind a piano, not playing, not singing, just looking straight ahead as if he had no idea what was going on around him.
Sad.
It is very sad. And as we now know, he was starting to go down with some kind of dementia. We don't know exactly what kind.
I actually went to see him. They did a tour. It was only about 4 or 5 years ago here in Spain. A couple of members of TRE went to see them, and they were very good. And obviously Brian Wilson was in it then. But did you say the band are still going in some form?
Yeah, they are. I saw them a couple of months ago at a stately home about, 50 miles outside London. And Mike Love, the original lead singer, now aged 83, 84, is still the front man.
Wow.
And one of the other original guys from the 60s, Bruce Johnston, is still there. And then everybody else on stage, and I don't remember them being introduced, are all much younger. And it was a weird thing for me because Mike Love's voice is pretty much gone. I mean, he's an old man now. But his personality was still there. So, he still sort of dominated proceedings. But the songs that I knew so well were being performed perfectly. I mean, they're all much more in tune probably than the original Beach Boys were on the stage, and the musicianship was great. But to me, it felt like a soulless thing because there was no personality. I loved the interplay of all the personality, the original personalities in the band and the voices that went with those personalities. And now there's just six guys up there singing, and I don't know who they are. And, they're doing a good job, but it's not the Beach Boys to me.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, but having said that, there was a crowd of, I don't know, maybe 20,000 people there, and 90,998 were really enjoying it. So it was just me, really.
And were the 9,998, were they sort of a similar age, young people? Were there any youngsters there?
There were some youngsters, but I have to say mostly it was an audience of people who were going, I remember this from the old days.
I remember the original.
As we do, yes.
Brilliant. Well, for our listeners, the book is being sold right now. Actually, not right now. We're not quite there yet. Thursday, I think it's out, isn't it, Peter?
That's right. Next couple of days, yeah.
Excellent. Well, people can buy it then or pre-order it from our website, TRE.radio. On our bookshop banner, it's called Surf's Up, Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys by Peter Doggett, which I'm chatting to now. I know you've written many other books, Peter. Do you have a website if people want to find out more?
I do. It's probably a little bit out of date, but I will have updated it in a couple of weeks, which is peterdoggett.org, I think.
It is because I've got it up now. Just wanted you to say it.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have plans for another book in the pipeline? Are you having a rest now?
This one I wrote at the start of this year. So, yes, I have got ideas, but nothing I can share with your listeners, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Keep us posted and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.
Bye.